here's our objectives. We're going to talk about create React app and what it is, what it does, and how to boilerplate a React application using CRA. We abbreviate this quite often in the field. Describe and be able to use PropTypes to type check specific data being passed to a child component. So first, real quick, who knows what this term even means? What does it mean to boilerplate an application? Scaffold, that's a really good word for it. Yep. Let me find, I know we've got this. I'm going to pin that. Thank you, Lucas, for setting that up. Okay, so the word, there it is, boilerplate, I had to look again. Boilerplate, when we boilerplate an application, we're kind of scaffolding it, or we're setting up the framework for it, not in terms of like a JavaScript framework, but more like thinking of building a house. You kind of frame out the house first, and then you build onto that. It's the blueprints, the template. Ooh, I really like template. It kind of gives you a template of like a starting point that you can start from. Yeah, start from a template. Nice. The code you write over and over and over and over and over and over again. Whenever you start a brand new project, you're always writing tons of code to get started, just to get to a point that you're like, okay, now I can give my app a title. Now I can start here and actually put a feature in. There's a lot of code that goes into these boilerplate templates. Yeah, set up a base. Yeah, that's a good one. Kind of base set of code that you can reuse over and over again for brand new projects. Starter code, basic setup that rarely changes from project to project. Great. Foundation, starter code, template-wise, yeah, it's all about that base. Cool. Those are really good explanations for what boilerplating is. So when we use this awesome tool, well, let me give you a little bit of background. It was probably in the overview. Yeah, when React was first introduced, there was an even steeper learning curve, and there was this thing called JavaScript tool fatigue. So just to start a React application, there was a lot of boilerplating that had to be done, and a lot of tools that had to be brought in just to even get to a point that you can start working on an app. And a lot of people kind of became fatigued by that, all the new things that you had to do just to get working with React. So it's now been, just to start an application has been streamlined. It's way simpler because of this tool called Create React App. Let's open this up real quick. Create React App. So here's their GitHub page. And it's basically a tool that will build all of that foundational code for you so that you have a starting point, a good starting point, a good boilerplate whenever you start a new project. There's a few different ways to run Create React App. It's a tool that is used in the terminal. You can use npx, npm, or yarn to start up, to create or boilerplate a new application. We're going to go with the yarn implementation here. So yarn create is a command that yarn has, but you have to have version 0.25 or above. So this is a new command, and you can use the create command with the React-app keyword here to boilerplate or create your new application. Then you give your application a name. So let's try this out. I'm going to open up my terminal. And let's go ahead and zoom in here a bit. Get to a point that I want to do this inside of. Yeah, we'll just do it right here in development. Okay, so I'm going to yarn create react-app, and we'll just go right off the example, my app. When you hit enter, this is what you should see happening in your terminal. My version of Yarn is out of date. So it builds everything, and we're doing Yarn add, and then it builds all of the dependencies that you need. So this is, it runs the setup code, it builds your package.json, and then it even runs yarn install for you. So since yarn install has already been done when you use create React app, it tells you exactly what to do next. So we suggest that you start by typing cd into your project and yarn start. At this point, there's a lot of people that kind of forget to cd into your project. So if we look, I'm still just in my development folder, right? So if I look at what's in this folder, I have the app I just created. So if I want to yarn start my app, I actually have to cd into that. So don't forget that step. And just for a reminder, it's always right here to let you know to do that. And then you yarn start, and just like every project you've been doing, there we go. It will start the project up for us here. Yay, now it's started. And there's my application. So that is create React app. We're going to take a look at what this creates, what the file structure is, what's inside here. I'm just going to take a peek, see if we have any questions. Don't you have to global or -- save first before create React app? Install the package on your computer. First, then you can run create React app. I think, let's go see. I don't think so. You don't need to install or configure tools like Webpack or Babel. Let's see, you'll need to have Node. We used to have to install the create. If you want to do it this way, you do have to install. No, npx does it for you. Let's see. Creating an app. I thought that with Create React App 2.0, you didn't have to install Create React App on your computer. I have it just from 1.0 -- version. Oh, what am I doing? CRA. Create. I don't remember the command for it. Someone tell me, if you don't have Create React App, if you have an npm installed Create React App, can you still, okay, yeah, here we go, Gil said it, yeah. If you do it with Yarn, you need to install Create React App. Perfect. Or if you don't want to install Create React App, then you can use npx and then go Create React App and my app. Yeah, we just changed Training Kit to say to cover Create React App 2.0. So I'll have to look to see if we missed somewhere, because I think what we're going to suggest is following the order that I showed here, running yarn, create, React, app like that. just so that we keep everything running with Yarn and don't have any issues that way. Okay, good questions. Let's see, just so I don't forget to ask later, for today's project, we are to fork and clone as usual, run create React app from, oh, yeah, so from now on, this is actually going to be, yeah, you're going to fork and clone as usual, run create React app from our local clone. Don't branch off of your local clone until you run create React app. So we could update this, say step 1, fork and clone, step 2, run create React app, step 3, fork off of master on your development branch. Okay, cool. I know that there are sometimes issues with, nice, thank you, perfect. We'll pin that. I know that there's sometimes questions about, or sometimes weird things that happen when we're using Create React App. So Training Kit goes over some of these. So here's some potential errors with Create React App 2.0. If you're not using a compatible version of Node, then you'll see something like this error here. To fix this, you need to have Node version. It goes through every step you need to fix this. So you need to install the Node version manager. So go to this link and install it. Once that's installed, then run this, and then use that version. So this installs the correct version of Node that you need, and this uses that version. And then try to generate your React app again and follow the normal steps. If it installs, if you have the correct Yarn version and Node version, and it installs okay, but then when you try to start your project and you run into something like this, this is a potential error. You'll have to follow this code here, those instructions there, and then save the file and run yarn start again. And we should be good to go. So great questions. Let's take a look. We're gonna open this in Visual Studio, and let's do that. We're going to do that. All right, let's take a look at what running Create React App actually gives us. So we've got our package.json. We've got our normal package.json here, and we've got our scripts, so we can run yarn start, yarn build, yarn test, yarn inject. We've even got a couple extra things that maybe we haven't seen in other projects, especially on Code Sandbox. I don't think this is included in Code Sandbox. This comes in because I have my ESLint config set up. So yeah, but the rest of this is pretty normal. Our dependencies here that we need, and our scripts. Then we have our public folder, which we know we've seen this before. This is where we get our root div to inject our HTML inside here. Let's see, so here's the image for that spinning, or for the favicon that is in the tab. If you haven't seen that word before, that's the tab that's right up here. So that's what this is up here. Then we've got our source folder, and there's a lot of stuff inside here. This is kind of more than we expected, right? But if you look at what was built, what started up when we ran our project, there's actually some obviously some code here and some animation stuff and an image. So I guess it's kind of expected that there's going to be some things inside this source folder. So we're going to talk about these real quick. In Code Sandbox, we're used to seeing just an index.js with our app component inside it. But when you use create React app, you'll notice that they are separated out. Our index.js is importing our app component and then rendering our app component like this. So that can be a little bit confusing going from Code Sandbox to a create React app application. You just have to think that they just pulled the app component out of index.js and put it into its own file here, and then exports it. So for example, if we look at our project for today, our index.js has our app component, but then does all the index.js stuff right here. So if we wanted to, we could just create an app.js file, pull the class out of here. Let's see, all of this. Actually, we want all of that. Copy, paste, export default app. And then in our index.js, we delete all of that. Import app from ./app, and then render our app. So that's all that create React app does, is it pulls the class out of index.js and creates its own file. I don't know why Code Sandbox does it this way when create React app does it the other way, because Code Sandbox says it uses create React app for a new project. So he lies to us. All right. So app.js, index.js. The next couple things here are kind of interesting. So we've got some test folders, a test file. We don't learn React testing in this unit. It's actually learned on the backend unit with JavaScript testing. So we get into the testing paradigm and testing flow in the next unit that you guys will study with Luis. But create React app does give you a test file here. This isn't going to mess up any of your code or anything. You can leave this. If you want, you can delete it and just take it out of the project entirely. Okay, then we've got our logo, which we know is used inside here, image logo. I usually delete this. When you delete that, you're going to get some errors here. So we have to remove the logo, remove the image tag. And then that leaves us with this service worker file. Service workers are really interesting, really cool things in JavaScript that kind of give you an extra JavaScript. Well, so service worker is some code that can run when you don't have internet, when they're really cool. This would be a fun topic to look into, probably after you're finished with Lambda completely, or if you really want to jump into service workers, they're really cool. So service workers, this service worker file is used for a specific purpose. Basically, let's go to our index.js where it's imported. It says if you want to run your app to work offline and load faster, you can change unregister to register and actually start using this service worker that is right here. Note that this comes with some pitfalls. learn more about service workers, go to this this site or this link right here. And this takes you to using Create React App to build what's called progressive web applications. A progressive web application is kind of a hybrid mix of a web application and a mobile application. It's an application that runs in the browser like normal, like we've been building, but that you can also download onto your desktop or onto a mobile device and use like a mobile app. So that's a whole other topic of study also. But when you run Create React App, it does give you the ability to start building a progressive web application. Since we're not building progressive web applications, I delete that. I delete this line here. And then I delete this file. Now I'm at a point that I'm ready to start building. And I build out my components, and I'm ready to go. So this is now at the point that we are very used to seeing and ready to roll with a new project. So for today, you're going to be you're going to use Create React App to start a brand new project. And this is going to be the InstaClone project, and you're going to work on this all week long. So for the whole week, you'll be adding new features, new functionality, and doing different things each day to build onto this project that you've been working on all week. It's a really fun project, and it's really cool when you are finished to have that up and running. Okay, let's go check out, see if there are any questions with what we've talked about so far. Okay, so here's some questions. Let's see. Yes, Gil, and when I go to package.json, it tells me that I have the latest of each dependency here. That is an extension, and I don't remember which one it is. But yeah, that is an extension. Let's see. In package.json, where the script's located, is that a ./thing? Script. Okay. Yeah, good question. So the scripts, I assume you're talking about these lines here. So when you're looking at package.json, the scripts are what you can run in your terminal. And what it does is when you run yarn and then something inside your, well, let's just go to it right here. So if I'm inside my project, I can run yarn and then any of these scripts, start, build, test, eject. And what happens if I run, for example, yarn build, is this is just an alias. Yarn build is just an alias for this right here. So it will come to my package.json, it will say I'm running a script, it will find the build script, and it will run this right here. So if we do something, if we do the yarn start, then you'll notice it was there for a second. Oh, I need to save my files. That's okay. I want that anyways. Let's look at that again. We'll try a different one, but you may have seen for a second before it started the project that it actually said React scripts build. So, or excuse me, start, because we ran yarn start. So you can see in your terminal that it actually runs this script over here. So if we do yarn test, right there, it tells us what it's actually running. So run it again, and there it is right there. And then it's done. So this is going to refer to this package that comes in right here. So React scripts grabs the scripts that are in this React scripts package. Okay, great question, Lloyd. Thank you. I don't think I can with mine. I don't think I can scroll when I start up. Okay. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And this would be the place to give yourself another script. If you build a script, then you can say this would give you the ability to run yarn custom, and then it'll run whatever scripting code you want. Okay, everything is saved. We should be able to run yarn start. There's React script start. And we have our project. We took the image out, and then you would normally probably just delete all that code and start from here. Now you'll notice that we are importing app.css, and here's the styling for app.css. In index, you're importing index.css. So here is the CSS for that. So keep that in mind as well with Create React App. We actually won't ever go into Webpack. We're just going to use Create React App to run to boilerplate a project. So we're not going to use Webpack. That is one of the things that gave React developers JavaScript tool fatigue, is using Webpack and having to build and scaffold your own project with those tools. All right, let's take a quick break, and then we'll jump into PropTypes. All right, come on back to your seats. Okay. Yay for React tooling. No more of this JavaScript tool fatigue. For reals was a thing, and there's, as it says, a topic that has an exhaustive amount of Medium articles. But today, because of Create React App, things are much simpler. We love it. Okay, now we're going to take a look at prop types. Did I skip it? Where's the prop types? Oh, no, didn't make it down there yet. Here we go. Okay, prop types. So we're going to use prop types to type check specific data being passed down to a child component. Now, there's a few reasons we like to use prop types. The biggest reason is that we want to have some kind of type checking system in our React applications. What does type checking mean? Good. It's a way to validate the code that's being passed around in our applications. TypeScript. TypeScript is a type check system. Yeah, it validates the type of data. So if you remember, in JavaScript, we have different types. We've got Booleans, strings, numbers, etc. So since we're passing data around a lot between components in React, as you guys well know, it's good to make sure that the data that's coming into that specific component has been validated, and it's the data that we're expecting. You'd be surprised at how often the data that comes into a component is the wrong data. Somewhere along the prop chain, prop line, the line of props that you pass from component to component, the data somehow changed or you pass in the wrong thing. And type checking is a way to, before you push some broken code to production, is a way to give you warnings as a developer that, oops, you put the wrong thing here, you're passing the wrong data down to this component. Yeah, great. Think like computer scientists more. This helps us not have to worry about thinking like computer scientists. Cool. So let's take a look at checking the types in our React app. First of all, someone mentioned TypeScript. There are some really great tools, type systems like Flow and TypeScript that are being adopted in React. For the last few years, Flow has been kind of the big type checking system, but right now there's a big push for TypeScript. If we look up TypeScript, it's a really interesting tool that you can use. I was hoping that there was more. Just a quick look at what it is. Quick start, React. So let's look at some code for using how you would use TypeScript, just so you can see this, because you will probably run into some TypeScript somewhere in the world. So we've got a hello component here that takes in a name and an enthusiasm level. And then we've got this weird syntax right here. So this is type checking the props object that's coming in and saying that this matches this right here. So what is this up here? Well, props, does the data that's coming in to props match what we have going on here? In other words, is name, as it's coming into this function, into this component, is name a string, and is enthusiasm level a number? Because we don't want to get those backwards, right? We want to say hello 1 plus enthusiasm level. But you don't want to get those backwards. You don't want name to be an object. If you try and render an object to the screen, it just gives you that weird object inside straight braces, right? Yeah. So it's important to know what is happening here. So yeah, some weird, we've got like some random question marks, we've got more of this happening. TypeScript is cool, but you kind of have to learn more syntax and more stuff on top of what you're already doing. What's really cool with PropTypes is it's a built-in type checking system. It's not quite as robust as things like Flow and TypeScript, because all PropTypes does is type check your props. Where these other systems will type check if you have a function in your component, it can type check the arguments that get sent to that function. So it can go beyond just the component level. It can even type check what's returned from that function. So you make sure that you, everywhere inside your application, you're checking the types. PropTypes, all it does is check the props being passed down from a parent component to a child component. So let's look at what that is. Yeah, let's go to PropTypes. Okay, I'm going to pass this to you guys. So here are the docs for PropTypes. As your app grows, you can catch a lot of bugs with type checking. For some applications, you can use JavaScript extensions like Flow or TypeScript to type check your whole application, but even if you don't use those, React has some built-in type checking abilities. In order to use PropTypes, we need to first get the library prop-types. We import what's be the object from there, and then we're going to type check our props. So let's do this in an actual application. I'm going to save all my files here, and let's do this. Okay, we'll come back to your question, Chris, because that's a really great question. All right, so everybody jump on here. I'm going to do an experiment. I don't know how well this will work with so many people, but I'm going to click go live. And classroom setting. This is a live sandbox. So even if I don't save, you should be able to jump in here and it will keep your project up to date. If I don't know if it will handle as many people as we're going to have jumping in here. So this is kind of an experiment. If this doesn't work, then we'll just go back to what we've been doing all last week. But let me know if you start seeing any bugs, or if it's not refreshing or keeping up, whatever. Let me know in here so we can change if we need to. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we're going to go into dependencies, and we're going to add a dependency. So you forked off of my that first link I dropped, the first sandbox link I dropped. And we're going to go into PropTypes. We're going to add the PropTypes library. So go ahead and bring that in as a dependency. Then we're going to, if you notice, this is our app component. And inside our render, well, let's take a look at this real quick so we can get the background of this Pokemon app and what we're going to do here. So we're importing data from /data out here. So outside of source, we've got this data file. That's just an array of a whole bunch of these Pokemon objects. And we're importing this array, its default export, into our app.js right here. Now, we are taking that data array and we're passing it to state. So this .state.pokemon is that huge long array that's inside this here, 3,476 lines of data. Then we have a Pokemon component, and we're passing this .state.pokemon, that long array, to Pokemon as props.pokemon. So when we go into Pokemon, we've got props.pokemon is an array of our data. And we're going to map over that array and display this div right here. And then we're using a couple of the fields for each Pokemon that gets listed in our list. All right, so that's what our project looks like. If I came into this component here and I wanted to build out some more features on in this app, if I wanted to reuse this Pokemon component somewhere, when I first come to this file, it's going to take me a minute to realize what data I have to work with inside this component, right? So another really, really fantastic use case for PropTypes is to kind of document what a component is doing and what data it has available to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to import PropTypes from prop-types. Okay? So go ahead and import PropTypes from PropTypes. Now we're actually going to build a prop type object for our component. This is we do this outside of the component itself. So at the end, after the closing curly bracket for our component, we're going to call our component Pokemon, and every component in React has a property called PropTypes, like this. Except it's lowercase. So this part gets confusing. You've got lowercase camel case, you've got uppercase camel case, and you've got kebab case. So the property on the component is lowercase, and this is a foobar name. You can name this whatever you want as you import it, but most people, the convention is to use it as a capital P, PropTypes. All right, so this is an object. We've got Pokemon.PropTypes as an object. What we're going to put in this object is every single prop that is coming down to the Pokemon component. So for every single prop that we're receiving on this component, we're going to add a property on this object. So right now, we're only receiving one prop, and that's Pokemon. So let's go into Pokemon.js, and we're going to say we are receiving props.pokemon. Now is the point that we get to tell our component what type to expect Pokemon to be. And you have to know your data to do this. We know that Pokemon is this long array, right? So let's take a look at the documentation here. And let's see how we can tell our component that we're using an array. Okay, so here is a PropTypes object, just like we just made. And it looks like we've got this array prop. So if we have an array coming into our component, we're going to say PropTypes with capital P, PropTypes.array. Oh, not that. We want to go to this. So Pokemon is array, so we're going to say PropTypes, capital P, dot array. Now we have this open. If you open up into a new window, we're just checking the console to see if there's any errors, and I don't see any warnings here. Okay, perfect. So let's take a look at what happens if we give this the wrong data. So let's say we wanted Pokemon to be an object. You'll notice we didn't break our application, right? We didn't cause any issues. It's still rendering. We can still interact with our application. But now we have this warning here. So let's read this warning. And it's important to kind of digest what the warning is telling us. The warning says, let me zoom in here. Zoom in a little bit here. Okay, the warning says, failed prop type. All right, so we know that there's a prop type that failed. Invalid prop Pokemon of type array supplied to Pokemon. So in our component, Pokemon here, we have a prop called Pokemon that was invalid, right? So in our component Pokemon, we've got a prop of Pokemon that's an invalid type. Then it tells us invalid prop Pokemon of type array supplied to Pokemon expected an object. So what it's saying is this component expected an object for props.pokemon, but we know that it received an array. So if we change this to string, then we're going to see invalid prop Pokemon of type array supplied to Pokemon expected string. So then when you see that warning, you have to go fix either your PropTypes object, if you are passing down the correct data, but you just named this incorrectly, or if this is correct and you really are expecting a string, you have to go fix your data. So this is obviously an array. And now we refresh, and we're not going to see any error. Okay, let's take a look at Slack, see if you've got any questions. Okay. Is the prop types in Pokemon list a foobar like the import? So this is the import that just came in. So this one right here is exactly what we imported. Let's take a look at that. So prop types is this object that we imported. So that's why we named this with a capital P. If we change this to banana, then we need to change this to banana. But again, this is the convention that you'll see, even though it gets confusing. This is what you'll see everywhere in React applications. And you want to be careful not to do something like this. I think it does give you a warning. Component Pokemon declared capital P prop types instead of lowercase p prop types. Did you misspell the property assignment? Why, yes. Yes, we did, React warning. Thank you very much. Now I fixed it. So it does tell you if you make a mistake there. Great question. Don't worry, Chris, I am still thinking of this up here. How do we add PropTypes dependency in our project in VS Code, or does it come with? It does not come with Create React App. So let's open this back up real quick. The only packages that come with Create React App are right here on dependencies. So if we want PropTypes, then we need to yarn add PropTypes. And then we should see this update, and there we go. Now we have PropTypes. Great question. Not a newbie question at all. Totally great question. All right, so what are some common reasons that, everything jumped. What are some common reasons that data is of the wrong type? Like, why is this even important? Why do we care about type checking? Some common reasons are that a lot of times most of the data you're going to be working with in a React application, in any kind of web application, a lot of the data is going to come from an API, right? So number one, you might get the wrong data from the API. And if you start to see that warning, then you get that warning with PropTypes, and you can let your backend developer know, hey, I was expecting an array of this, and I got an object. So that's one kind. That's not as common. Another one of the most common is when you bring data into your application, then a lot of times you're going to manipulate that data, and a lot of times manipulating that data takes a function. So you write a function to manipulate your data, it returns your data after you've changed it up a little bit, and let's say you kind of messed up in your function, but you've already defined your prop types, you've defined what you want your data to look like, and so you think that you have changed your data in the correct way and it's ready for your application. But you didn't. You messed up your function, and now the shape of your data isn't what you thought it was going to be after running it through this function. And so that's another really great reason that we use type checking systems. If you get used to writing what we call pure functions, that is a really safe way of kind of going about changing your data. But yeah, a lot of time it's hard to be functional and write pure functions all the time in JavaScript. And so type checking systems like PropTypes just make sure that we are, when we make those changes to our data, it looks correct. So I'd say that's one of the biggest reasons. I did see one come in, so users trying to input. So sometimes you get user input that you don't expect that's a little bit different. Hopefully that gets caught in your in your testing stage before it goes, before your product goes live. But that is another example of common reason that we run into this problem in the first place. Whew. Sorry, that felt, as I was explaining, that that felt a little confusing. I think this paragraph right here is pretty noteworthy. So one of the blessings and curses of JavaScript is that we have dynamic typing. In other words, when you declare a variable, that variable can change. You can declare an array, but somehow later in your application end up with an object because of some function that you run or something along the way that you didn't foresee that change happening. And so that's one of the curses of a dynamically typed language. Because of that curse, we can use these type systems. Of course, it's better to make sure you don't. That change, when you have an unexpected change to your data, that's what we call a side effect. And most side effects are you don't foresee them, right? You wouldn't write your function that way if you foresaw that it was going to change your array to an object. But it does happen, it will happen. You will see that a lot more as a junior developer in the first year or so of your career than later on. But because of that idea that our data is going to change and we're going to introduce side effects to our data, we use type checking systems. Okay. Whew. I'm glad this is working. Yay. We'll keep using this. All right, so let's dig into this a little bit more, and then we'll take a break. So on the idea that I am coming to this project, and I'm going to reuse this component, and I want to kind of use PropTypes as a way to document a little bit of what's happening in this component, kind of tell the story of this component. This isn't quite as helpful as I'd like it to be. Like, okay, great. I'm going to use this component. I know I have to pass down an array, but an array of what? Well, luckily for us, we have something like array of. So with PropTypes, you can declare a prop that is any specific JS type: array, Boolean, function, number, object, string, symbol. But as described, maybe this isn't super descriptive, and obviously in our project we're expecting an array of objects. But what if we pass down an array of numbers? We wouldn't get a warning here because we're passing down an array. So to be even more careful with our prop types and more descriptive for future development work here, we're going to say that we're passing down an array of, and then we use prop types again, objects. And let's refresh, and no warning, because this is an array of objects. If we told it array of numbers, then we would, of course, see our warning. This one's a little bit different. It says it's looking at the first item in the Pokemon array, saying an object was passed down to Pokemon when we expected a number. Oh, whoops, I meant to type object. Silly me. There we go. Thank you, PropTypes. You saved me once again. Cool, so we're almost there, but this is kind of like the array thing, right? Where we don't know like what is on our object. How do we know what that object is supposed to look like? If I want to reuse Pokemon, I want to come in here, look at PropTypes, and know what my array is made of and what my object is made of. Luckily, we have a helper for objects as well, similar to array of. It's called shape. So in our shape, we are going to invoke PropTypes.shape and pass in an object and tell our component what parameters or properties, excuse me, what properties to expect on this object. So let's take a look at this. So Pokemon is an array of objects, but instead of object, we're going to say shape. We're going to do parentheses. We're going to do pass in an object. And from here, now we get to start to specify all the fields that are on our object. There's a couple things with this. First of all, some people will only put the actual fields that's being used inside this component in your PropTypes object. It's kind of up to you. It's up to your team how you want to do this. If we look at our data, we obviously have a lot of fields on our data set, right? But in here, we're using 1, 2, 3 fields. So because of our inherent laziness, because we're developers, we would look at this and say, I'm not even using type or height or weight right now, so I'm not even going to include that in my prop type. And that's kind of how it goes, and that's okay. Let's start right now just adding these 3 fields in here, and then we'll go add some more. So we've got ID, we've got image, and we've got name. So here's the 3 fields we're using. Let's type out. We're going to give all of these fields the type that we're expecting these to be. So we go look at our data. An ID is a number. So we're going to go to Pokemon.js. I'm going to say ID is PropTypes.number. All right, that's as specific as I need to get with that piece of data. Image. Let's go look at what image is. Image is a string. Name is a string. Perfect. So let's get both of these, the PropTypes.string and PropTypes.string. All right, now I can come to this component, and this is a lot more helpful for and for me in the future, or for anyone else who's going to come reuse this component or build out more data to know what's being pulled in to this component here. Okay, we see that Pokemon is an array of objects, and every Pokemon object has an ID, an image, and a name. And then we can see the same, kind of the same error. Pokemon.name was given a string when it expected a number. Okay, let's add something else in here. Let's look at our data. We haven't seen, we've seen strings, we've seen arrays. Oh, let's try this one. Let's do the type. And let's see. In our Pokemon.js, we're going to pass in the type of Pokemon. Now you guys tell me what we're going to write right here. So here's our data. What are we going to write for our prop type? Yeah, we'll get to enumeration in just a minute here. This is not a response to my question, just so you guys know. Nice, yeah. So we're going to type an array of and then we're going to pass in string because it's an array of strings. So let's do this. We're going to say type is PropTypes dot array of, and then we're going to say PropTypes dot string. Okay, let's go look, see if we get any warnings. We're going to refresh. Oh, nope, no warnings. Perfect. Okay, awesome. So what if we have some very specific string values that we want this to be? So we know that there are, or for those of you who are not familiar with Pokemon, every Pokemon that we see on the list here is a specific type of Pokemon, and there is a limited number of types in our entire type set of Pokemon. So let's do a little experiment here. What we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to use this enumeration prop type. And we're going to say that the type of Pokemon can only be one of whatever we pass in here. So let's read this again. You can assure that your prop is limited to specific values by treating it as an enum, or enumerated value. So what would this look like? Well, we're gonna use our prop type warnings to build our entire list of types. I don't want to look through my entire list here. I don't want to go through all 3,000 lines just to find all the different types. So let's just start here with Bulbasaur. We know that grass and poison are each an enumerated type. Okay, we have grass and poison values. Let's go to Pokemon.js. Now it's an array of strings. Type is an array of strings. Let's see, so how can we do this on an array? One of, prop types one of. Okay, so the strings that we are passing to it is going to be one of these values here. So we invoke it and we pass in an array. Let's maybe drop this down to its own line, like this. Let's drop these down to that line. Okay, so we know we have grass and we have poison. Okay, let's go check out our warnings. We know there's a lot more Pokemon types out there, so let's go see. Aha. Let's see. Fire. So fire was passed, and we expected just grass and poison. So let's go add fire. I think these are capitalized. Casing does matter here. Okay, let's see the next one. Flying. So the type flying was passed to our type when we only expected grass, poison, and fire. So we've got flying. Let's go see the next error. Water. Let's see, then we get bug. I didn't know that was a type. And normal. Hopefully this exercise does not take super long. Electric, we'll end on this one if we see any more. If that doesn't cover, I think we're gonna have psychic, right? Psychic. Ground. Okay, this will be the last one, promise. Whoop. All right, there's even more. Fighting. So there's probably more. We could build out this whole list, but I'm not going to take class time to do that. But you can see how this would be really valuable. You don't want your back-end developer to add an erroneous Pokemon type, right? So if you got data from your database back that had some, I don't know, cloud. I don't think we'll ever see a cloud. If you got data back that was a cloud type, and there's no such thing as a cloud type Pokemon, you don't want Sandslash to be given the type cloud, because then your end users are like, hey, what the heck? There is no cloud Pokemon. So enumerated values can be very powerful, but you won't see them as often. Let's just take a look at this list. We won't go through everything on here, but it's good to know what kind of prop types you have available. So node, you can pass like a div as an option, as a prop. An element, you can pass an instance of a class. We talked about array of. You can say object of. So if you have an object that all the properties are going to be numbers, then you can say object of. This one isn't very common. Obviously, a lot of your properties on objects are going to be different. Plus, it's better to do shape so that you can inform other developers what properties are on that object, rather than just doing, oh, there are a bunch of numbers. Good luck figuring out what the property names are. Functions. This one is used all the time. We know that we pass functions down as props. I should never ever see you use any, because what the heck is the point of using prop types if you're just going to say, oh, this is a piece of data. Good luck. Like, that doesn't protect you against anything. This is like the wild card of, or the asterisk star of just anything. Then you can do some custom stuff, which we're not really going to look into there. So yeah, that is the list of prop types. Now, it's kind of a cop-out if you use array or object. So just so you know, when you are working with a team and that team requires you to use prop types, if you type proptypes.array or proptypes.object, or obviously proptypes.any, you're not really helping other developers when they go look at your components. So most teams ask you to use array of and shape. I'm just going to see if there's anything else interesting that we could do. Let's do this nested thing. So we're going to, well, yeah, let's just do this real quick. So each Pokemon has type, yeah, right there. We're going to say next evolution. And this was the prop type array. So we're going to say array of. And then let's take a look at next evolution. It's an array of objects. We're not going to say proptypes.objects, right? We're going to say proptypes.shape. And we pass in an object there. And then we type check the values. Num and name both are strings. Prop types.string. Cool. One last thing before we take our last break and then jump into just kind of a quick review on props and data flow is there's also a way to say that some property values are required and some are not. So I don't know if we have any Pokemon here that don't have a next. Oh, let's try this one. So Bulbasaur, no, Ivysaur is an evolution of Bulbasaur. So in the Pokemon world, Bulbasaur evolves into Ivysaur, who evolves into Venusaur. And you'll notice on Ivysaur that Ivysaur has a previous evolution and a next evolution. But if we look at Bulbasaur, we don't have the field previous evolution, right? So not every object is always created 100% equal. There may be some missing fields, and we want to let developers know that, hey, every single Pokemon in this list is going to have a name and an image, but not all of them are going to have next evolution or previous evolution. I bet if we look at the next one, Venusaur, he doesn't have a next evolution. Yep, he's just got previous. So let's do this. We're going to say that for every Pokemon in our list, ID is required. Every object in our array has an ID, and that is a required field. We're using it right here, so that would be required. We have to see an image, so we're going to say that our image is required. And we're going to say we want to make sure that every Pokemon has a name. But not every Pokemon is going to have next evolution, right? So let's say we wanted to use next evolution in our code. So right here, after Pokemon name, we're going to create a div that is going to map over Pokemon.nextEvolution.map, and we're just going to call this EV for evolution. And we're going to display in the paragraph tag the evolution. There we go. Okay. So we're going to display the evolution. If we look, hey, we don't have to go to our data file because we know exactly what each object inside this array looks like, right? So we're going to say, we're going to display the name of the next evolution, ev.name. And up here we'll say next evolution. Okay, but what error are we getting? First we need to close a tag right there. So let's take a look at this error. We know that not every single Pokemon has Pokemon.nextEvolution. So because of that, even though in our code we're using next evolution, right? So for the first Pokemon it sees, we're going to get this error, cannot read property map of undefined. So when we get to Venusaur, who doesn't have that property next evolution, then it's as if we did this, next evolution undefined. Well, you can't dot map off of undefined, right? That's not a function on undefined. So you are going to see this error, cannot read property map of undefined. So then I go down here and I look and I say, oh, next evolution wasn't actually required. So maybe not every Pokemon in my Pokemon array is going to have a next evolution property. And that tells me as a developer that if I want to use evolution, I need to check for it first. So I'm going to say if Pokemon dot next evolution exists, then I'm going to map over and I'm going to create this map. Otherwise, I'm going to do nothing. And then you can see that our project now works. Even though, let's do this. We don't want Venusaur to have next evolution, right? That's Venusaur. Yeah, that is Venusaur. We'll just stick that little title inside our checking. So where we check for if we have next evolution, we're going to say next evolution, map through the evolutions, and name the evolution. If we don't, if the Pokemon doesn't have a next evolution, then we just list nothing. Then we would do the same thing for previous evolution. We would, in our prop types, say previous evolution, and we would say, we would check for previous evolution up here. Okay, but this gets kind of tedious, right? We don't want to always have to check for every single value. So what if we did it this way? What if we could tell our prop types object that next evolution isn't required? So if an object comes down that doesn't have next evolution, let's just give that object a default array. And that's where we get default props. This might be easier to display for our full array here. So we're going to do this on the Pokemon array. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to forget to pass in Pokemon. So let's not pass in Pokemon. So now we're at that same error, right? We forgot to pass in Pokemon. It's undefined. This actually will happen if you're making an API call for this information, your component will mount and try to render Pokemon before you get your data from your API. So you would have a situation like this where Pokemon equals undefined because you haven't received that data back from your database. And so you can run into this error. So for Pokemon in the prop types, we're going to say that it's not, Pokemon itself is not a required prop because we're getting our data from the database, and there's going to be a period of time, maybe 200 milliseconds, that we don't have data here. Because of that, we don't want to run into this error. What we're going to do is we're going to define a new property on Pokemon called default props. And for any of our props, we're just going to do this on the top level. For a Pokemon prop that's not required, any top level prop that's not required, we're going to say, we're going to give it a default value. And look at that. Even though we passed in undefined to our Pokemon component, we're not getting that broken error anymore. Because now an empty array has been passed in. The Pokemon component saw that Pokemon was coming in undefined and passed in an empty error instead. So let's take a look at this in the React tools to prove that is true. Here's Pokemon, and our props is an array. Even though we technically passed in undefined. Then your database call gets back. Oh, let's do this.state.pokemon, and you can render your list of Pokemon. Obviously, I need to fix some of the styling here, but yeah. Okay. I feel like I've been talking a lot. I apologize. Let me see if there's any questions. And oh, looks like we just have this one. Okay, cool. Yeah, the docs are really great. So if you've got the same question, check out the docs, and that will help clear that up. All right, let's take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll talk about props and data. And if you guys have any other questions, if there's something like really specific you want to cover in this last 20 minutes of class, throw it into Slack, and we can talk about that. Okay, let's finish this up. Thank you to Skylar and Chance. We have our full list of enumerated Pokemon types. Woohoo! All right, so let's take a look at, there's a couple questions that came in. Oh, zoom in, I'm so sorry. Usually I'm at 150%, I don't know. Maybe I'm just like 125, I don't remember. Okay. Yeah, so this is a really good question. What is going on here? Like, how is this even a thing, right? Sorry, hold on one second, I can get a drink. Okay, I'm not dying. Whew. All right, so as Frank mentioned, this is a component, actually, from React called a fragment. And this is the shorthand for fragment. We could import fragment from React, and we could throw that into here, and it's the same thing. And we need our closing one. All right, so fragment is really useful for not having a ton of extra wrapping divs. We know that in JSX, when we return JSX out of a component or out of a render function, when we map over something like this, we can only return one level of things, right? We can't do another div down here. We're going to get an error. Adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. So that's talking about these two divs are adjacent JSX elements. And if we wanted to do this, we'd have to wrap another div around these two. So you can only have one, unless you do an array, you can only have one level of things, elements. So this does not work. So we've ended up, when React 16 was first released, it came with this fragment component. And what this does is it makes it so that we don't have to add a bunch of these div wrapping components to kind of muddy up our HTML. So with our div, if we go look at this here, what is heck? Okay, so if we go look at this here and we inspect, we see that we've just got this random div that we don't really need, right? So we've got div root, div app, and then just this empty one that's like, why have this one more layer of extra divs? Well, as we nest every single component, we're always adding more and more wrapping divs. So we're just adding one more layer here. And then in here, these two, this extra div. We don't need this extra wrapping div, right? So we got the fragment component. Now we know that we don't need to import it. We can just do empty braces here, or empty carets here. We could even do this right here inside our map. And we could do it inside this map. Well, if you have something like a key or a class, I think you do need a div. Oh no, you would need to bring in fragment. And then give it a key. I don't know, let's experiment with it. Let's do this first and see what the outcome is. So now that we did that, we have, let's take a look at our structure now. A lot better. We don't have that empty wrapping div that was really not serving a purpose other than to satisfy our JSX, right? So that fragment component disappears completely. It's taken off the DOM. Then we go inside here, and there was a div wrapping these two paragraph tags, and we don't see that div. It's gone. But we are getting an error saying that, let's just refresh this and look at the error. or the warning saying each child in an array or iterator should have a unique key property. So that's coming from right here. We're not getting a unique key property like we're getting for this inside this map. So we've got a map here that we're not giving a key. So let's try this. We know that we can put div key, and that is one solution. I don't think this is going to work. I don't think we can do fragment just because it gets stripped from the DOM, which would kind of not even serve the purpose of doing this key. But let's just try it. I'm going to say just the ev dot. Say that. Let's go see. Oh, encountering two children of the same key. Key should be identical. It's working. Let's try. Let's pass in our index. Index. And let's make that our key. And let's refresh. Oh, cool. So yeah, you can add a key to a fragment like this. I'm fairly certain you need to have, yeah, you have to actually import fragment at that point. Let's go take a look at the structure now. So we've got our Pokemon, we've got our list, and yeah, that fragment's gone. But on the virtual DOM, React is now able to keep track of what's being mapped right here. Cool, really great question. Let's see, what is the problem of having lots of divs? Does it hurt performance? There's not really, it's not a performance thing, it's mostly just we don't like having just empty divs everywhere. As far as a design aspect, if you're using something like Sass or less, imagine having 2 extra layers of divs in here that you'd have to drill down into to style this next evolution paragraph, these next evolution paragraph tags. Oh, that gets displayed twice. Darn it. Oh well. So that's one reason. There was a mention in our comments over the weekend, those couple long threads that we had about getting feedback, that someone said, why are we not doing more semantic HTML? You guys go for 5 weeks learning, having it pounded into you, semantic HTML. In the React world, it's less of a thing, but enough to the point that we try not to add tons of wrapping divs if we don't need to. So it's a really great way to kind of make us pretend we're being more semantic, even though we were not ever. So that's part of it too. Yeah, great question. Let's see. Yes, if you wanted a class name, then you would need to have a div. So if you think about it, if we tried to add a class name to that fragment doesn't even make it to the DOM, which means if we had a class name on it and we were trying to style something, it wouldn't be there. Good point. Okay, so that is our questions there. Let's talk about the prop flow and the data flow for this app. So we've got data being imported here inside. Oh, we separated that out. So we put that here inside our app.js file. You can pretend that this is coming from a database. Next week, we're going to learn how to actually get. What happened? My Chrome just died. Next week, we're going to actually get this data from a database. and then add it to our state object. So we can pretend that, whoa, let's see, am I on the right one? No. Oh, I think I forked off of it. Okay, here we go. That was strange. All right. As I was saying, we're going to get this data from the database and put it onto our state object. Sorry, you guys just all got kicked off the live session. Everybody, is it still going live? Oh, nice. All right. So anyways, right now, it ends up on state. If we look at, let's turn off notifications. There we go. If we look at this, if we were to kind of draw this out, we would see something like this. We have our app component, app.js, and this is holding our state. This is a stateful component, so it means it's a class component, right? Then we've got a child component called Pokemon. That is receiving our state, our data from state via props. Now let's say that we had a click handler, like a button, that was going to change this data. Well, inside our app component, we would define a function, and we would pass that function down on props as well. And inside Pokemon now, we can invoke that callback function inside Pokemon via props dot whatever the callback function is called. And let's say we wanted to click on a Pokemon and go to like some Pokemon profile page, right? Or display something about that Pokemon. We want to know up here inside app, we want to know which Pokemon we click on. So inside our callback function, we're going to pass in the ID of that Pokemon. So in Pokemon, in our child component, we're going to invoke our callback function, pass in the ID of the Pokemon we just clicked on, so that up here in app, we now have access to the ID. We now know exactly which Pokemon we clicked on because we have that ID inside that function. So you can kind of think of it as with events, like a click event or typing event or scrolling event, we can pass data back up through callback functions. So if there's ever something that we need to know about here in our children components, if our child component has something that a parent component needs to know about, we need to use an event or a callback function to get that data, bubble that data back up to our parent component. This drawing is all well and good, but one of your amazing PMs drew, oh, I'm still drawing, made an even better one for us. So I'm going to pass this to you guys. Let me find where we were at. Oh, that's Friday, Saturday. I think it's in one of these two long strings. Okay, This is a really great visualization from Melinda about props and data flow and state. Okay, so this is concerning the to-do app. So I want you to think back to our to-do app from last week. We had our app.js that was holding our state and beautifully wrapped in this wonderful heart. Now inside app.js, we are in a class component. So to access our data, we're going to use this dot state. If this was a child component to another component, we would also have this dot props available to us here. But for the to-do app specifically, we had this dot state dot to-dos. Then we passed data and functions down as props. Props is always top to bottom data flow. So those props got passed down to our to-do list, and we had props.todos. This was a functional component, so there's no this keyword. That to-do list got passed down to our to-do.js, and we had our specific to-do that we referenced here in to-do.js. Then each child component is imported into a parent component to be rendered on the DOM. Now over here in our to-do form, we had a couple more things going on, right? We had props passed down for our forms, for our inputs, and we had like an on-click to add a new to-do that was passed down, and that a function was passed down so that we could click add a new to-do, and that would get added to our this.state.todos up here, because to-do list needs to know about it. So if we wanted to add a new to-do, we had our form. Oh, that's the one. We had our form over here. We typed in the to-do, and we click add. How does to-do list know about what we just typed in? It has no clue, and we can't pass data this way. That does not work. Come on. So because of this whole idea that we've got data over here in what we consider a sibling component that we're trying to get over here, we need to use a callback function to pass that data up to the ancestor component, to the parent component. We're going to add it to our state, and that state gets passed down with props. Okay, so this is a really great visualization. Let me see if I can, I don't know what's up with my computer, it's being super weird. Maybe it's because we're still running live. Let's end the live session, because we're not going to be doing things over here. Okay. We're going to clear everything. So I'm going to give this to you guys. This is a really great visual representation using that. Oh, did we just get it? Thank you, Sam, for passing that on. So really great visual representation of to-do list and how that's working. Okay, cool. Did we get this? Copy the link. Oh, that's the other one. So here is the sandbox from today, and everything is saved. Let's take a look now at the project that you will be building this week. Oh, no, that's not what we want. We want projects right here. React Insta-Clone. This is a fun one. Ask your PMs about this. This is a cool one to work through for the whole week. Okay, so because this is a multi-day project, you've got different READMEs right here in the base folder of your project. So today's, you're going to start with readme.md. Tomorrow's going to be day 2. The next day will be day 3. And then the final day will be day 4. So for today, each day will have a focus that kind of tells you the objectives we went through in class. It has the project setup, or where you should be at from the previous day's work. And then it has your tasks for the day. So basically for today, you'll notice that we have some dummy data here for you. And these are basically Instagram posts. They've got an image, they've got a number of likes, they've got some comments. So for today, you're going to use Create React App to boilerplate a new application. Then you're going to build these kind of container components. So we kind of split this up into a search container, a post container, and a, I believe, comment section. So let me, that's not what I wanted. Let me just zoom out a little bit right here. Okay, so you'll have 3 containers. You've got this search component, you've got a post component container, and then you've got a comments section. So build out your file structure and go through each task for the day. You're basically today going to render your data onto the screen. Get your project boilerplated and get it rendering. Then also use PropTypes to check the data that's coming into each component. Then you're going to style it up and make sure that it looks good on the screen. But as far as like interacting with any of this stuff down here, we're going to save that for the next couple of days. So tomorrow, if you finish those, here's your stretch problems. Implement the ability to comment on a post with the add a comment input. That's one of tomorrow's tasks, so that gives you a head start on tomorrow's stuff. This one isn't a next day task. This is just something that you can use for the timing, for the timestamp of each. I think it's in the comments. Let's go look to see where we have timestamp. Oh, it's for the actual post. Okay, so your post has a timestamp, and you can use the moment.js library to make that timestamp look human readable. So those are your 2 stretch goals for today. And then, of course, you can jump into day 2 if you get past both of those. All right, let me just double check here. Why is this huge? I don't even know. See if there's any last questions, and then we'll be done for today. Where's my pins? So confused. There we go. Yeah, I think I don't mind sticking around just for the next 10 minutes and going over default props again if anybody wants to listen to that. Cool. So we'll be done today. And you can stick around as I go over default props again real quick. Otherwise, I will have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow. Okay, so there's my application. All right, let's take a look at our prop types here. And let's go to the default prop values. So one problem that we have with data inside our applications is that sometimes our data is not there. And this happens because of we get our data from an API, right? So there is a period of time where our data is undefined. We have not received it yet. Without default props, let's go and comment this out. Without default props, we get to this line of code right here, and we're trying to read the map property of undefined. So cannot read property map of undefined. Right? That's exactly, we passed in undefined to Pokemon right here because we don't have this data from our database yet. So that throws that error because the value of props.pokemon is undefined. And undefined does not have a property called map. So we get this error. We want to not get this error. We want this situation not to block our app from rendering. So there's a couple things we could do. Sometimes you'll see something like this. If props.pokemon is falsy, if this isn't a thing, return loading Pokemon. Oh, let's throw this in a string. Like that. Okay, so Pokemon came through undefined. So we're going to return, which makes it so we will never hit this code here, right? So we just tell our Pokemon, we tell our user that we're currently loading our Pokemon. Hang tight, it'll show up here. Or the other thing we can do is to make sure that we don't run into this here, is if our data doesn't come through, hasn't returned yet, we can't say that this is required, right? We can't say that that Pokemon is required because we're getting it from a database and we have a period of time that we don't have this passed down on our component. So we can't say it's required, but we also get this error. So instead of saying it's required, or instead of going through the work to add that loading message, what we're going to do is we're going to say that if the Pokemon prop comes through undefined, we're going to give it the default of an empty array. And now when we take a look at our app, and we look at it in React, hey, where's my React? There's a lot of weird things going on today. Where's my React tools? That's Redux. Come on. That's super annoying. Let's just do this. Console.log props. Okay, so we passed in undefined is the value. We're console logging props that come in. So we can see that we get props.pokemon is an empty array instead of undefined. And that's because we gave it a default prop of an empty array. We could say, we could give this like default prop, and then we'll see that it comes through like this as default prop. So whatever value you give it here is the value that it comes that gets that is given to this prop if you don't have it here. Even if you didn't pass it down, you still get an empty array. So then when our data does come in and our app re-renders, you didn't break your app, you didn't throw a message on your user screen. The app re-renders and you get your display here. So last thing that I wanted to say is if we're in this waiting state, like it's undefined currently because we don't have data from our database, and we see that props.pokemon is an empty array, this is where you can use your loading message. So if props.pokemon, we know it's going to be an array, so you can say .length is 0, then return like a spinner component or something, or return the string loading data. So you can use this to your advantage because you know with default props you're going to have an array instead of undefined. So you can say if my array is empty, that means I don't have my data, which means I can do that. Okay, does that help? Why is it when you add a default to Pokemon empty array, you won't also get an error for, say, ID or name? Oh, good question. So if that's because of how map works. So if we're doing this, and we're mapping over an empty array, then it's as if we took all this out. If we take that out and return another empty array. So we're not actually doing any markup if we have an empty array for props.pokemon. All it does is return an empty array. It doesn't return any of our JSX. So, but yeah, that's a really good question. Okay, awesome. Can't open the project. Cool. All right. I will see you guys tomorrow. Enjoy your Instagram project, and yeah, have a great day. Thanks for sticking around.